Hello, my name is Ben Hovland, and I'm a commissioner with the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, or EAC. For election administrators, the challenges associated with running elections have never been more difficult. As the federal clearinghouse on election administration, the EAC is working to provide information and resources for election officials and offering whatever support we can at the federal level to help state and local officials administer safe, secure, accessible, and accurate elections. As part of that, we've organized this video about the University of Southern California Center for Inclusive Democracy's voting location siting tool, which is designed to provide assistance to county election officials in the placement of voting locations. The tool was initially released for California in February 2018. The voting location siting tool now serves 10 states: Arizona, California, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Wisconsin. We're fortunate to be joined by three excellent panelists to discuss the Center for Inclusive Democracy's voting location siting tool and how it may be useful for election officials around the country. Dr. Mindy Romero is the founder and director of the Center for Inclusive Democracy, which is part of the USC Price School of Public Policy. Keith Ingram is the director for the Elections Division of the Office of the Texas Secretary of State. And John Tuteur is serving his 6th term as Napa County, California Assessor, Recorder, and County Clerk. Mr. Tuteur has over 42 years of county service in multiple roles during his career. We're going to start things off with a presentation by Dr. Romero about the siting tool, and I'll then follow that with a few questions for our panelists. Dr. Romero, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Hovland. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to give a very quick overview of the tool. And of course, those folks that see this webinar at a different time, at any time, can contact us for more information, can go to the site itself and play around with the tool. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you do have additional information that you need. So let me move the video here out of my way. So the tool itself is available, publicly available on our website, which is, as already stated, the Center for Inclusive Democracy at USC. This is the direct link, cid.usc.edu/siting tool, and I think we can probably make that available to everyone with the webinar. I always like to show people, though, if you lose that link, you can just simply go to our website, which has a shorter URL. We try to make it really easy to find the siting tool right up there on top. You come here, it gives you information about the tool itself, overview about what the tool's purpose is, some social media information, those sorts of things. We have some testimonials if you push on this button from both elected officials and community groups. And of course, you can simply come here and pick a state. So before I do that, I just wanted to describe what the tool is all about. So this is a tool that's been around now for a few years, as already mentioned. We first launched it in California. And then over the last 6 months, year, we have expanded the tool to this many states, as you can see here on the map, and really by demand, by recognition that the tool was helpful in California and that it could be helpful to election officials and community groups around the country. And so, as the name suggests, and as information here provides, gives you some detail, the tool is about helping election officials cite locations. We started off in a vote center state or vote center counties, such as Registrar Tutor's county in Napa. So the tool was citing vote centers as well as drop boxes, adhering to local election policy, election law in California. As we've expanded the tool, we moved into Arizona and Texas, of course, elements of both of those states having vote centers, but also having traditional polling place counties. Of course, Colorado being a vote center state, having its vote center model. And then we moved on to other states that don't have vote centers, that have traditional polling place models, and the tool has adapted, and I'm happy to talk about that too a little later on. But the idea is that there is lots of data in this tool that literally models out through an algorithm, essentially, suggested locations for decision-making around the location of vote centers or polling places. So let me go ahead and take you into, I feel like I should take you into Texas, since we have, here we go. So as you enter into an individual state, you see your state. The first thing you'll notice is that in yellow, those are all the states that are, excuse me, all the counties that we're currently modeling. Over the next few months, we will be filling out the rest of Texas and the rest of the other states that aren't yet fully complete. We selected the moderate to large counties to do those in time for the general election, as we were told that would be the most helpful, considering just limited resources and time. But we want to make sure that we come back, and which we're doing, to complete the rest of the states so they're full. And no county essentially has more data than another. If we move in here, I'll move into, actually you can pick it either through the map or through this drop-down menu. I'll show Harris County just because I've demoed that a few times. What we've got here is the county itself you see on the map. Over here on the left-hand side, we have, based on the required or at least publicly stated number of vote centers for this county that the public is aware of and that the election office is going to be citing for. That's the number that we cite for in our model. So we don't pick a number that we think is appropriate. We base it off of local election law requirements. So we start with that number that's given to us through local law. And then the model says, based on a number of variables, which I'll show you in a moment, what is the kind of optimal citing, right, that would best serve the needs of voters in that community, most equitable, or at least as close as possible. So let me first take you over to methodology. So all of the data that's in the model, you can come here. So you can see we have data from the percent of county voting age citizens, eligible. I'll just scan through this really quickly. Eligible, not registered, percent of population with vehicle access, population density. My screen will cooperate. Of course, vote by mail information, and we're updating all this to have now 2020 data, but we had 2016, the most recent comparable, right, general election. Vote by mail use data, information on, different populations, African American, Asian American, Latino, white, and so forth, disabilities, those with limited English proficient populations, or the level of English proficient population, excuse me, and transit stops. So all of that's in the model. Let me come back out here. And it's mainly a combination of census data, American Community Service, American ACS data, and of course, voter records as well, for instance, on the vote by mail variable that you saw there. So the model itself, all of those data go into the model. It's a facility allocation model, and it tells us the most equitable, right, the most appropriate in terms of citing. But what we always say, and it's really important that we frame this publicly this way, and we want to make sure all election officials know that this information, this tool is just exactly that. It's information. It's to inform the work that you do. We are not saying that these are the locations that election officials should use. We understand, and we actually have several notes throughout the tool and on the main page to acknowledge that election officials know their communities best. Of course, there's lots of other factors that you have to consider. History, of course, availability of sites themselves, which is even more of a challenge this last year. Input from local elected, local community groups, many, many factors. This is data that we know that many election officials don't have to help inform, right, to use as they think makes sense, and hopefully very much to use in conversation with communities, a transparent data tool that everyone can use. So here, before I show you the suggested locations, I wanted to show you all of that individual layer data that goes into that citing. It's all right here. So demographic and voter data, population data, points of interest data, and because of time, I won't be able to show all this to you, but just to let you know that you can click on any of this. Let's say you want to see the percent of census tracts that are African-American. You have that here, percent Latino, disability, percent of the population with disabilities, again, from the ACS data, limited English proficient. It's all here as individual layers. So you may be looking at the suggested locations. You may not be. You may come here just for this individual layer data. You may use this for voter outreach and education. Lots of different purposes. Community groups may use this for voter outreach and education. So all of this is here, but I'm going to go ahead and close that up right now. And let's talk about citing. So in the general election in 2020, Harris County was citing 800 vote centers. So what our model does is suggest these are half-mile squares. So again, we don't suggest individual locations, and that's clear on the tools documentation. We wouldn't be able to responsibly do that, right? To know if a location makes sense, if it's actually open and agreeable and has ADA and all those sorts of things. So we cite areas, half mile, and the tool, right, suggests that here. And you can see some are more, more closely, some areas are more closely populated in terms of suggested locations. So you can click on any of these suggested locations and get information. Again, for time, I won't get into the details here, but this shows you some of the information kind of simply put, low, medium, high, kind of easy to digest. And you can also move back out. And in this election, Harris County did 120 vote centers. They did 800 election day vote centers. So 120 early, election day, 800. But we also give you this, all potential sites. So we actually start by mapping out an entire county, and we remove, to begin with, all of those areas that couldn't possibly viably have a vote center, not whether they shouldn't or should, or a polling place, whether they should or shouldn't have a polling place, but just whether they actually could hold, right? So whether, there's viable land there. So we remove things like lakes and rivers and mountainsides, areas that don't have a road network, areas that don't have buildings or any kind of collection of people. And so for Harris County, this is what that looks like. So everything in these pink shades, or all the areas that could possibly have a vote center. Again, not that we're saying should or shouldn't. The model then is given that 800, in this case, 800 number for election day. And they're outlined here, or you can just take off all potential areas again and see it more clearly. And the model selects the most optimal 800 out of what was 3,382 optimal locations. So again, potential locations. So again, there were 3,300 potential locations. The model suggests 120 or 800. Okay, so when you come here to the all potential areas, an election official may or may not, right, be interested for a lot of reasons in what areas the model is suggesting, those 120 or 800 specifically. Maybe you're looking at a site that is not one of those, right? You're limited because of what's available to you, or again, because of all those other pieces of information that you have. There's another site in another part of town that makes sense, but you want some data on it, right? For you to make up your own mind through your own internal conversations, or perhaps to be able to discuss it with community groups. You can come to any of these locations, not any of these on the potential page, and you can click and we give you information. So again, that information is to use in whatever ways it makes sense for you, but you may be deciding or looking at an area, in one part of town, and that information is helpful for you. So again, for time, I'll just skip that, but I do want to show people, if I just look at the 120, this gets incredibly detailed. For time, I'm just going to do this and go back. You can also put in an address and go straight to the address. There's a use this tool button, and all of the data that's available on this tool, the citing, the specific scoring, which I don't show you right now, all of those individual data layers that I clicked on briefly, quickly, like population and voting rates and so forth, all of that is available to be downloaded right here. This is part of our effort, is to make this as flexible and hopefully as useful to election officials as possible. So you can come here. There's more descriptions of the data. Again, you have that information in the methodology section, but you can download all of the data that's here. You can pull it up into your own systems, use it in any way that makes sense for your offices. Probably many ways that we never thought of, and that's exactly what we hope. And again, I'll show you one other quick thing. Let's just look at the 120, since there's fewer of them. Here's these individual layers again that I mentioned to you. All of this data again are part of the modeling that go into the scoring for these suggested locations. But you also can, let's say you're looking at these suggested locations, you're saying, okay, this is helpful, but we want to know how these locations, or our locations that we're considering in our office, specifically serve one particular community or one particular variable that you're interested in. So maybe you want to know how it serves, in this case, a Latino community. So you can click on the percent of the population that is a Latino. And again, use this in any way that makes sense for you. Maybe you're having conversations with groups that advocate for the Latino community. Maybe it's the youth population, right? You want to know how the distribution serves the youth population, or the voters with disabilities, or the population with disabilities. So again, lots of different combinations, as well as, I didn't show this a moment ago, transit stops. So again, you can zoom in down to the neighborhood block level and see all this, but I won't for time. We have, in this case for Harris County, we have supervisory districts. The last thing I'll say, just because of time, is over the next few months, I mentioned that we're going to be expanding in every state, filling out the rest of the state, so all counties have the tool. But we also are going to be updating the tool, certainly with 2020 data, but also with input that we get from election officials around the country that have used the tool or have interacted with it in some way. So as we go forward, we hope to customize it a little bit more for each state. As we expanded really quickly over the last year, we made this a tool that could work for every type of election model, whether you're a vote center or a polling place, whether you're a hybrid in some form. But we'll be seeking input on ways to customize this a little bit more, additional layers that make sense for communities, make sense for election officials, that are helpful and useful. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop there. And I think we did that in about a little over 15 minutes. I think we're okay on time. Thanks.
That was
again.
great. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Romero, for that presentation. Now I'd like to ask a few questions of our panelists who are kind enough to join us today. Mr. Tuteur, I'll start with you. Editing tool got its start in California, and as a local election official there, can you tell me a little bit about how you've used the citing tool in your jurisdiction?
Well, actually, Napa County began converting to vote by mail back in 2006. And by 2012, we were already 90% vote by mail. And as the local election official, I wanted to provide services to our vote by mail voters, as well as our polling place voters. And so I opened something called vote by mail assistance centers, which were open for, in most cases, a week before the election, where vote by mail voters could come in, replace their ballot if the dog ate it or if they lost it, and do those kinds of things. So we were already this model before California implemented the Voters' Choice Act. And Napa County was one of the first 5 counties out of the 58 in California that implemented the Voters' Choice Act because we were already there. And what was so amazing was that our seat of the pants location of our voting assistance centers matched almost exactly what Dr. Romero's model brought to us. Ours were, of course, transit stops, population, locations where we could find things. Dr. Romero's tool was very helpful on a smaller scale when we got down to actually locating vote centers within our two larger communities, the city of American Canyon and the city of Napa. And we were able, using the tool, to find a North Napa location. So we have 11 vote centers now and have had those ever since June of 2018 when the Voters' Choice Act rolled out. And we have been working with Dr. Romero to keep her tool up to date to make sure that the live experience of elections officials like myself do match with what she's created. And I can tell you it's been a very good fit. And our community groups who worked with us on what was called our election administration plan, which we needed to do to become a vote center, Voters' Choice Act county, worked very closely with me and with Dr. Romero, and all 3 entities, the election official, the community groups, and of course, Dr. Romero, had a high level of confidence that where we were citing our vote centers was the ideal locations to provide the maximum opportunity for underserved communities to exercise their precious right to vote.
Thank you for that. Mr. Ingram, can you talk about why this was a resource you thought local election officials in Texas would be interested in?
Absolutely. So as you may know, Texas is large. We have 254 counties. We've got 39 counties that have over 100,000 in population, but all the rest have less than that. And so we've got a good mix of urban, highly urban, like Harris County, as well as very rural. And this tool provides information customized to each county. So in Texas, we've got 77 counties that participated in the countywide polling place program, vote centers, last fall. And we've got the rest of the counties that use polling places. And this tool is adaptable for each of those situations, for rural, for urban, and it's got information in it, as Mindy said, or Dr. Romero said, that is useful for election officials to either discover where a good location would be, or to confirm what they already believe to be a good location. And so the information that's available is just another tool to use for county election officials when they're deciding on where to put a polling place, either in early voting or on election day.
That's great. And Dr. Romero, there was something I wanted to hit on that you mentioned earlier, and Mr. Ingram just hit that. That the early uses of the citing tool were focused on vote centers and drop boxes. And you mentioned earlier that it started being used for more traditional precinct polling places. Can you talk about that, or what is associated with that?
Sure. So as we first developed our model, it was specific to California and indeed those 5 counties initially that adopted the Voters' Choice Act and had vote centers. But we knew that it was something that we at least wanted to expand out through California. And so from the beginning, and of course, California has a mixture of voting systems, we knew that it was a model that needed to be built in such a way that would be flexible and adaptable. And the key piece of information that the model needs is how many. So the model doesn't determine, as I mentioned before, the number. That's not our role. We don't try to say what number, in terms of sites that counties should be locating. The model is given that number. So that is determined by local law and the system that a county has or a state has. And then the model just models based on, okay, there's 30, there's 50, there's 100, there's 800, whatever it might be, locations. Let's run this through and see, right, what an appropriate, useful distribution of these locations are. So it is adaptable. We'll be making some tweaks as we go forward, just learning from 2020 and just the wide variety of states that the model was in, that we had the tool in, in these last few months. But so far it's held up really robustly, and we're really happy with the flexibility in the model in terms of being able to serve different jurisdictions, small, large, different voting locations. I mentioned earlier that the tool served moderate to large counties, but of course, in many states, moderate is still quite rural. In Texas itself, there are many counties that are quite rural that the tool is available in, and again, will more so as we fill out the tool over the next few months.
That's great. Mr. Tutor, you discussed how you've used the citing tool. Can you discuss any other ways that you can imagine that it'd be helpful, or any of your colleagues in California have shared ways that they've used it differently?
Well, I think that the basic robustness of the citing tool makes it usable for almost any use. As you've seen, it went from vote centers to polling places. We became a vote center county. We went from 99 polling places in 2006 for our approximately 75,000 registered voters down to 11 in 2016, and then converted to vote centers for 2018 forward at 11. That was just a coincidence that the two matched. It wasn't on purpose. So it is hugely flexible. And I think what it does that I really liked was it gives you a discussion platform with your community groups. That is what's so helpful. They have access to it. You have access to it. It's not some esoteric election official dominated kind of tool. It's something everybody can see and understand. And it allowed us to have a dialogue with our community groups as they talked about, well, what about this location versus that location? And then we could talk about the things that both Dr. Romero and Mr. Ingram raised. Maybe there are no buildings there. Maybe nobody will have a vote center there. And we can then talk with our community groups about what's real as opposed to what's ideal. So it's a wonderful discussion tool as well as a citing tool.
That's great. Mr. Ingram, you mentioned Texas has 254 counties, which is always amazes me. I'm sure that means that people have come up with a lot of different ways of doing things. Can you talk a little bit about some of the success stories or examples you've seen in the ways that the citing tool's been used by election officials in Texas?
So We felt like we needed to make sure that the counties that are mapped in Texas had access to the information. We had a webinar last fall with Dr. Romero and invited those counties so that they could see the advantages and see what was available to them. And like Mr. Tutor mentioned, this is just such a data-rich, flexible, robust, multi-layered thing that it's just about impossible to walk away from it, and not use it. Why would you ignore something that's so useful, that's so data-rich, that's so flexible when it's available to you? I mean, it's just one of those things that we wanted to make sure our counties knew of and were ready to utilize.
That's great. And Dr. Romero, I mean, we're fortunate to have 2 states represented that have used it, but obviously there are 10. And so, I don't know if there are any examples or stories that you'd want to share from other states that you've worked with on how the tool's been used or how this data has been useful to election officials.
Yeah, thank you. And first, I just have to give my appreciation again to Director Ingram and Registrar Tutor, both for your interest, your interest in the tool, and also, of course, sharing it with others. And Director Ingram, during an election cycle that was incredibly busy, to pull to convene election officials in Texas as you did, greatly appreciated, and I know that what I understand they valued also being shown that information in a time when they could use it. So thank you. Other states. So, well, first off, our second state was Colorado. And that actually came about as we were expanding the tool in California. The Director of Elections, Judd Choate, which I think probably many who view this webinar know, he reached out to us and asked if we would consider bringing the tool to Colorado. They've had an evolution over the last number of years, of course, well-known, switching to the vote center model in their state, and a lot of success through that effort. But an element that they were still seeking more information and more assistance with was the citing component, the citing process. So that was just a great partnership period. Director Choate's office, facilitating all of the conversations. This tool really works well when we're able to create relationships as much as possible. It's not always possible in busy election cycles, but when we're able to connect with election officials, when they have us as a resource, when they understand kind of where we're coming from with this tool, that this is something that is totally up to them to use, but we hope that it's useful in many different ways. And his office was great in that sense. But we have heard from folks like Harris County, Texas, and Maricopa County, Arizona, we work with pretty closely as well, and they demoed it internally and with others. Election officials in Georgia and Pennsylvania and other states. So it's, again, very different systems, different points in time in the election cycle, different maybe pressing needs versus other states, right? Variation across states. And the one common theme that we heard was, this is helpful for us in some ways. If we've already done our citing, because sometimes we'd heard that, right? And some counties are already done with their citing, we can use the tool for outreach and education. Or we can use the tool very much so for that community dialogue to help build trust in conversation. And that's something I want to make sure we do emphasize today. Registrar Tutor is a really fantastic example of that, using the tool, bringing it, convening his community groups to talk about it. Again, now more than ever, kind of having the transparent, shared public data from a nonpartisan university-based research center. I've heard it's just been a critical component of this, that people have that to share and talk about and discuss and to build trust and build dialogue.
That's great. And sort of along those lines, you mentioned the expansion of the tool beyond the 10 states that you're in so far. If there are officials who are watching this and they want it to be available with their state's data, maybe sooner than some others, what should they do?
Well, we'd love to hear from them. They can reach out to me directly, to my center. We are looking to expand. We have been contacted by a number of states. I can't promise that you'd be first in the queue, certainly. Some of it is, it is helpful, I will say, information to know when a state is already interested in it, feels there's a need, has a built-in, communication ability with their local election offices. the more people know about the tool, obviously, the more impactful it's going to be. So if there's a state that is ready to kind of take it and run with it, that's really helpful for us to know. And we want to know. But we'll be building out our schedule over the next year and making public announcements so everybody's aware and can know when to expect it and so forth.
That's great. Well, this has been a very informative conversation. I want to thank you all for taking time to discuss this citing tool. If anyone watching this wants more information, again, check out the Center for Inclusive Democracy's website at cid.usc.edu. And I'm sure anyone here would be happy to answer any questions or help out if there's more information that you need. Thank you again for watching this, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.